All right, we are doing our Half Magic Chapter 4. What happened to Catherine? Next morning, there were no secret meetings before breakfast. Jane stayed in her room and Mark stayed in his room, and in the room they shared, Catherine and Martha hardly conversed at all. Each of the children was too busy making private plans and deciding on favorite wishes. Breakfast was eaten in silence, but not without the exchange of some excited looks. The children's mother was aware that something was in the air and wondered what new trial lay in store for her. When their mother had gone to work and the dishes and other loathly tasks were done, the four children gathered in Catherine and Martha's room. Catherine had already checked to see that the charm still lay in its cubbyhole, unharmed by wish of termite or mouse. Jane had drawn up some rules. The wishes are to go by turns, she said. Nobody's to make any main wish that doesn't include all the rest of us. If there have to be any smaller wishes later on in the same adventure, the person who wished the main wish gets to make them, except in case of emergency. Like if he loses the charm and one of the other ones finds it. I get to go first. Catherine had something to say about that. I don't see why, she said. You always get dibs on first because you're the oldest, and grown-ups always pick Martha because she's the baby, and Mark has a wonderful double life with all of this and being a boy, too. Middle ones never get any privileges at all. Besides, who hasn't had a wish of her own yet? Think back. It was true. Jane had had the half fire, and Martha had made Carrie half talk, and Mark had taken them to half of a desert island. Jane had to agree that Catherine deserved a chance, but she couldn't keep from giving advice. We don't want any old visits with Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, she said. Make it something that's fun for everybody. I'm going to, said Catherine, but I can't decide between wishing we could all fly like birds and wishing we had all the money in the world. Those aren't any good, said Jane. People always wish those in stories, and it never works out at all. They either fly too near the sun and get burned, or end up crushed under all the money. We could make it paper money, suggested Catherine. A discussion followed as to how many $1 million in large bills it would take to crush a person to death. By the time the four children got back to the subject of the magic charm, 17 valuable minutes had been wasted. But now Mark had an idea. Well, we found out the charm can take us through space, he said. What about time? You mean travel around in the past? Jane's eyes were glowing. See Captain Kidd and Nero? I've always wanted to live back in the olden romantic days, said Catherine, getting excited too. In days of old when knights were bold. The others were joining in by now. For once, the four children were all in complete agreement. Put in about tournaments, said Mark. And quests, said Jane. Put in a good deed, too, said Martha, just to be on the safe side. Don't forget to say two times everything, said all three. They clustered eagerly around Catherine as she took hold of the charm. I wish, said Catherine, that we may go back twice as far as to the days of King Arthur and see 2 tournaments and go on 2 quests and do 2 good deeds. The next thing the four children knew, they were standing in the midst of a crowded highway. 4 queens were just passing, riding under a silken canopy. The next moment, 7 merry milkmaids skipped past, going a-maying. In the distance, a gallant knight was chasing a grimly giant with puissant valor, and in the other direction, a grimly giant was chasing a gallant knight for all he was worth. Some pilgrims stopped and asked the four children the way to Canterbury. The four children didn't know, but by now they were tired of the crowded traffic conditions on the King's Highway and crossed into a field where the grass seemed greener and fresher than any they had ever seen in their own time. A tall figure lay on the ground nearby, under an apple tree. It was a knight in full armor, and he was sound asleep. The four children knew he was asleep because Martha lifted the visor of his helmet and peeked inside. A gentle snore issued forth. The knight's sword lay on the ground beside him, and Mark reached to pick it up. Immediately the sleeping knight awoke and sat up. Who steals my purse steals trash, he said. But who steals my sword steals honor itself, and him will I harry by wood and by water, till I cleave him from his brain pan to his thigh bone. I beg your pardon, sir, said Mark. We didn't mean anything, said Jane. We're sorry, said Catherine. The knight rubbed his eyes with his mailed fist. Instead of the miscreant thief he had expected to see, he saw Mark and Jane and Catherine and Martha. Who be you? He said. Hath some grimly foe murdered me in my sleep? Am I in heaven? Be ye cherubim or seraphim? Oh, we be neither, said Catherine, and this isn't heaven. We are 4 children. Pish, said the knight. Ye be like no children these eyes have ever beheld. Your garb is outlandish. And garb means their clothing. People who live in tin armor shouldn't make remarks, said Catherine. At this moment there was an interruption. A lady came riding up on a milk-white palfrey. She seemed considerably excited. His gallant knight, she cried. The knight rose to his feet and bowed politely. The lady began batting her eyes and looking at him in a way that made the children feel ashamed for her. Thank heaven I found you, she went on. You alone of all the world can help me, if your name be Sir Lancelot, as I am let to know it is. The children stared at the knight, open-mouthed with awe. Are you really Sir Lancelot? Mark asked him. That is my name, said the knight. The 4 children stared at him harder. Now that he wasn't looking so sleepy, they could see that it was true. No other in all the world could wear so manly a bearing, so noble a face. They were in the presence of Sir Lancelot du Lake, the greatest knight in all the age of chivalry. How is Elaine? Catherine wanted to know right away, and little Galahad. I know not the folk you mentioned, said Sir Lancelot. Oh, yes, you do. Sooner or later, said Catherine. You probably just haven't come to them yet. Be ye a prophetess? Cried Sir Lancelot, becoming interested. Can ye read the future? Tell me more. But the lady on the milk-white palfrey was growing impatient. Away, poppets, she said, getting between the 4 children and Sir Lancelot. Gallant knight, I crave your assistance. In a dolorous tower nearby, a dread ogre is distressing some gentlewomen. I am preceptress of the Distressed Gentlewomen's Society. We need your help. Naturally, said Sir Lancelot. He whistled, and his trusty horse appeared from behind the apple tree, where it had been cropping apples. Sir Lancelot started to mount the horse. The 4 children looked at each other. They did not like what they had seen of the lady at all, and they liked the way she had spoken to them even less. Catherine stepped forward. I wouldn't go if I were you, she said. It's probably a trap. The lady gave her an evil look. Even so, said Sir Lancelot, needs must when duty calls. He adjusted his reins. Catherine drew herself up to her full 4 feet 4. As you noticed before, I be a mighty prophetess, she cried, and I say unto you, go not where this lady bids. She will bring you nothing but disaster. I shall go where I please, said Sir Lancelot. There, said the lady. You'll be sorry, said Catherine. Enough of parley, said Sir Lancelot. Never yet did Lancelot turn from a worthy quest. I know who ye be now. Ye be 4 false wizards come to me in the guise of children to tempt me from my course. 'Tis vain. Out of the way. Flee, churls. Avaunt and quit my sight. Thy bones are marrowless. Giddy up. Sir Lancelot chirruped to his horse, and the lady chirruped to hers, and away they went, galloping down the king's highway. The 4 children had to scatter to both sides to avoid the flying hooves. Of course, it was but the work of a moment and a simple problem in fractions for Catherine to wish they all had horses and could follow. Immediately they had, and they did. Sir Lancelot turned and saw the 4 children close at his heels, mounted now on 4 dashing chargers. Away, fiends, he said. Fiends, see? They actually talked like that back then. Shan't, said Catherine. They went on. The 4 children had never ridden horseback before, but they found that it came to them quite easily, though Martha's horse was a bit big for her and she had trouble posting. And it was particularly interesting when every time the lady started casting loving looks at Sir Lancelot, the children would ride up close behind and make jeering noises, and Sir Lancelot would turn in his saddle and shout, Begone, demons, at them. This happened every few minutes. Sir Lancelot seemed to get a little bit angrier each time. When they had ridden a goodly pace, they came to a dark wood stretching along both sides of the highway. Just at the edge of the wood, the lady cried out that her horse had cast a shoe. Sir Lancelot reined in to go to her aid. The 4 children stopped at a safe distance. Then, just as Sir Lancelot was dismounting, 3 knights rode out of the wood. One was dressed all in red, one in green, and one in black. Before the children could cry out, the knights rushed at Sir Lancelot from behind. It was 3 against 1, and most unfair. But even so, Sir Lancelot's strength would have been as the strength of at least 9 if they hadn't taken him by surprise. As it was, he had no time even to touch his hand to his sword before the 3 knights had seized and disarmed him, bound him hand and foot, flung him across the saddle of his own horse, and galloped off into the wood with him, a hapless prisoner. The lady turned on the 4 children. "Ha ha!" she cried. "Now they will take him to my castle, where he will lie in a deep dungeon and be beaten every day with thorns. And so we shall serve all the knights of the Round Table who happen this way. Death to King Arthur!" "Why, you false thing, you," said Jane. "I told him so," said Catherine. "Let's go home," said Martha. "No, we have to rescue him," said Mark. "Oh," said the lady, "just you try it. Your magic is a mere nothing compared with mine, elf spawn. Know that I am the great enchantress Morgan Le Fay." "You would be," said Catherine, who didn't like being called elf spawn, as who would. "I remember you in the books, always making trouble. I wish you'd go jump in the lake." Catherine wasn't thinking of the charm when she wished this, or she might have worded it differently, but that didn't stop the charm. "Good old charm," said Mark as he watched what happened. Morgan Le Fay didn't go jump in the lake. She merely fell in a pool. Luckily, there was a pool handy. She slid backwards off her horse and landed in it in a sitting position, and luckier still, the pool had a muddy bottom, and Morgan Le Fay stuck there long enough for Catherine to make another, calmer wish, which was that she would stay stuck and unable to use any of her magic for twice as long as would be necessary. This done, the 4 children turned their horses into the wood and set about following the wicked knights. Morgan Le Fay hurled a few curses after them from among the water reeds, but these soon died away in the distance. There was no path to follow through the wood. The branches of trees hung low and thick, and the earth beneath them was damp and dark and dank, and no birds sang. "This," said Catherine, "is what I would call a tulgey wood." "Don't!" cried Martha. "Suppose something came whiffling through it." The 4 children pressed on. Suddenly they came to a clearing, and there amidst a tangle of lambkill and henbane and deadly nightshade, they saw the witch's castle rising just ahead of them. Poison ivy mantled its walls. There were snakes in the moat and bats in the belfry. The 4 children did not like the look of it at all. "What do we do now?" said Jane. And we'll have to find out what they did tomorrow. All right, hope you enjoyed that. We'll find out part 2 of chapter 4 tomorrow. Good night, guys.